Hey guys, welcome to Tea with Taylor. Thank you for joining me today again. Thank you for following on the socials, for all the love and for all the comments and all the things pertaining to. Really appreciate it. And today we are going to jump into part two of the Negro Experience, a series brought to you by Tea with Taylor from the depths of my brain, honoring Black History Month. And we're going to highlight a little bit more today some Black stories, some Black trailblazers, like we did in the first part. And I'll give you guys a few minutes to join in with me. And thank you again for also joining the Progress channel for all of our projects. If you haven't caught our last episode on Tuesday, you can watch that right now anytime on Facebook or YouTube. So make sure you get into it. We got into some really good conversation. And let me find us on Facebook and see how good we're looking. Uh, really excited to share this with you guys today. Hopefully, we don't have any sensitive viewers today, or hope no one gets offended by anything I say. But if so, maybe you should re-examine yourself a little closer. that's that's my answer to that. And I have found us. I think we look great, and I am going to make sure to follow your comments. If you want to say something, if you just want to say hello or anything along those lines, feel free. I'll be making sure to pay attention. I have a few little current event topics for you guys that we're going to start off with, just to run through um, before we get into the lovely Negro experience. And one of those major things that I'm going to start with, the first that I'm going to start with, the most pressing, and we talked about this a few times here, the Progress Channel gang. We've talked about it a few times on Tea with Taylor since it's happened, and I'm just over enthused and thrilled that the system that we have in place here has some sort of checks and balances, seemingly, because Miss Marjorie Taylor Greene is being banned, is being exiled, as I saw in the article, from any further meetings and even reconsidering her position. And I'm just going to say clap, clap, clap. Fine, someone did something, thankfully, because that was unacceptable. Her behavior, the things that she said online, and we have to hold people accountable for these things because, as we've seen when we don't with some people in power, they continue to do those things and they are completely inappropriate. So I'm really glad that there's some sort of repercussion happening, even to the point where Marjorie Greene's out of here. I think I'm gonna say it. I'm just gonna be the first to say it. Hoorah! Um, uh, so over it. I have so much more that I could say about Miss Marjorie, but I'm gonna keep it tight, keep it right, because that's not what we're talking about today. That's not what we're here for. I also noticed something that really touched home for me, that excited me actually. There's excitement around the Rodgers and Hammerstein's remake of Cinderella, the one that I most popularly known to be starring Whitney Houston and Brandy. It is, as I call it, the Black Cinderella, and it's a really amazing film. The songs are amazing, and I may be a little bit biased because Whitney Houston and Brandy are two of my most favorite like songbirds. From the '90s too. I'm a '90s baby, so I might be a little bit biased about this one. But I'm really excited that there's like so much buzz still happening around this movie. It's an older movie. It happened, I want to say, '94 or something along those lines. It's an epic telling of Cinderella story with Black characters. And if I'm not mistaken, the prince is some sort of some sort of Asian in this one. Not quite sure, but I'm excited for it, and I'm glad that it's being publicized. I'm glad that it's reaching a public forum. I think it's coming to Netflix. Not sure, but yeah, it's about time. It's really great. It's one of the best versions of the story that I've seen told. And shame on you, Disney, for taking so long. Actually, it's coming to Disney Plus. What am I saying? Of course. Sorry to get your hopes up, guys. Jaden says Biden said he wouldn't tolerate anyone saying ludicrous statements like that would be fired, and he stuck to his word. I'm glad she's gone. Seriously, Jaden. I wasn't quite sure if she was actually like completely kicked off of her post, um, being in the house, but hopefully that's the case because that's the only punishment that fits the crime. And if it were anyone else, we wouldn't have this conversation. It would have just been happening. So peace out, Marjorie. Thank you for that, Jaden. And another thing that, today I said we're going to highlight coming out stories and more Black stories with the Negro experience. Uh, and although she may not be Black, a younger person um, had just come out publicly. The person I'm speaking of is JoJo Silva. Some of you may not know, if you have children, you definitely know who JoJo is. I am new to learning who JoJo is myself because of my younger siblings, and she's just a very energetic TV personality, a TikTok sensation. She has over 32 million followers, and she's 17 years old. And she had an interview recently on The Tonight Show, and she was encouraged by her partner, by her girlfriend, to come out on her own time. And she felt that this was the time. She's 17 years old, again, encouraging a lot of the younger generation, a lot of young girls growing up right now. And she's very energetic and bubbly, and she's great at what she does, at the kids shows that she does, and a lot of people know who she is. So I think it's great to see someone of her stature coming out gracefully and beautifully, and she still hasn't revealed who her girlfriend is. But I thought that was a really, really amazing thing to do. It took a lot of courage, and I'm just gonna highlight and acknowledge that JoJo Silva. Um, again, we were gonna highlight Black and gay legends and icons today, but I also want to highlight coming out stories. I posted something on Facebook a few days ago about listening in on you guys and wanting to hear all of your coming out stories, good or bad, because they're not always good. Majority actually are bad, unfortunately. But I'm really interested to hear that, and in comparison to coming out stories of people in our past. And I'm really excited about the way people have responded to that. So thank you. But we are remembering more so than the gay thing. Not more so, but most importantly, right now, we're remembering that Black history isn't simply, celebrating Black voices that we agree with, or Black voices that are passive and calm and collected, or listening to the words of gospel. We are also making sure that we acknowledge the revolutionary. We're making sure that we are listening to the Black rage. We're listening to resistance. We're listening to the distrust in the Black community. And we're making sure to keep our ears to the ground for that. Because not only is it important to reveal the revolutionaries, but it's super important to listen to the calm people as well, the calm, cool, and collected, because they have the ideas, they have the points, they have the words, they have the courage to get that out there and to speak for us. But we also have to listen to the Black rage. And a lot of allies or white allies and a lot of people outside of the Black or brown community don't listen to the rage, or don't listen to the distrust, or don't listen to the revolutionaries. And that's equally as important to highlight and to teach Black history year round. It's not just something that we just come upon in February and think that it's going to be enough to just say it's Black History Month. No, this is something that we need to make sure is a part of everyday life, a part of people's common knowledge, because we're here. Black people, brown people, people of color, gay people, we're here. And it, unfortunately, to refer to a little bit of an older statement, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. We're here, we're brown, get used to it. It's unfortunate because over 12 million people were displaced, mostly from Africa, to be a part of this country and to be a part of where we live. And and those people were not given a choice. That's something that we look past. We weren't given a choice. And moving forward from that millennia where those 12 million people were displaced, not by their own doing, then you are erased. That began the process of erasing history, and that began the process of the Negro experience, erasing what we had left behind in Africa, erasing the families and the cultures that we were building in Africa, or in the places that they removed us from, to be a part of this country. And like my good friend Dion Baker always says, that he's quoted a few times now, when James Baldwin said, "We built this country," he meant that. And that's not that's 100% accurate. We built the railroads, he said. Without acknowledgement, without being told we're doing a good job, without being paid, without anything. We built the country as POCs, and we didn't have a choice in the matter. And then I listened to my good brother Malcolm X, and he's talking to me about the house Negro and the field Negro. And for me, that stuck out to me as a really, really, really sore thumb, and explains a lot for me, especially within the Black and Brown community, and how we choose to interact with each other. The classist system that has become a part of the Black and Brown community within ourselves, looking upon ourselves as if we're different or as if we're better than one another, as if I can't speak to this person who is my Black brown sister, who is my gay brother and sister, or uh, transgender sister. We have to look past these small differences because these are the things that have been ingrained in us since that day, since that millennia when the 12 million people that have become our ancestors since then were displaced. We have to continue to look at these kinds of conversations that these legendary people have given us, this knowledge that is leaving us, this knowledge that has been put out there for us to learn from and to move forward, especially in the current condition and the current state of our world. And I can't say that enough. Um, but the house Negro, the field Negro, these are the classes systems that created by the white man to differentiate between us that we somehow still abide by, whether you do it on purpose or not. It unfortunately is a thing that happens where, again, and I'm gonna break it down to you for a little bit. The Excuse me, let me get a little drink. I'm going to break it down for you a little bit, and I'm going to explain to you how this classes system is still so relevant within our society and within our own community, and something that we can do to avoid this or to realize this would be to come together in the way that we speak of, in the way that we know that we should, and speak on it. Uh, Jonathan Trinidad says it helps to have peers gain the courage because coming out is hard, and it is very hard, and it's different for everyone. And I appreciate that, Jonathan, for real. It's definitely an issue. We were talking about coming out stories a little earlier, and we're gonna go right back to that. And Jaden says not only did the POCs build this country, they also were abused, murdered, raped, sold, and treated like property while building an entire empire. And again, it is something that is often overlooked, and we just can't. We can't sweep that fact under the rug like we want to. We can't look past that like we want to. And once we begin to not do that, this when the true healing will begin. Um, and again, those not only were they building a nation, but they were abused, murdered, raped, sold, treated like property. And that gets into the conversation about the house Negro. The house Negro, or the house nigga, as white people would say, and we're not gonna use that obviously, but the house Negro, like Malcolm X said, is the kind of person who they ate good, they lived in the house with master, they served in the house, they weren't outside, they didn't do any strenuous labor, they dressed well because they were given nicer clothes to fit in the house. Um, they were most importantly comfortable. They didn't see past what they had been given, which was the bare minimum at the time. The house Negro, was comfortable with master, even to the point where some of them liked their master, would do things like cook for them or wait, or things that they didn't necessarily have to do, become protective over the house that they were enslaved in. And then we see that a lot of the house Negroes were satisfied in captivity. They were given a golden cage and told that this was their property as well as the white man's property, but it wasn't. It never had been. And even when a Negro person had access to a home or to a building on that land, it was, for lack of a better word, shitty. And it was controlled by the white man, a lot like it is now in communities where we see there are distinct Black communities that have become Black communities because white people have moved out or because it has become underfunded and a person who could afford to move out would live in those areas, and they become these undesirable areas. But again, House Negroes getting satisfied and comfortable in captivity, they had no prospects and they were blissfully unaware. They kept they were kept around specifically by some masters to keep the field Negro tamed. Um, and if you don't see where I'm going with this right now, then I'm gonna break it down to you for even a little bit more. The House Negro was very satisfied with receiving the bare minimum of things, being treated like a person and being housed and being clothed. And even in today's society, we have this kind of we have this kind of POC. We have this kind of person who wants things to be better, and who wants things to grow, and who wants change. And we have these people who just are comfortable with the small wins that we get and the small things that are offered to us, as if it's not the bare minimum. Um, and that is what I'm going to refer to as the House Negro complex. If you can't see past the prospects of what you have now and what we're doing to be considered even on the same playing field, or to close that wealth gap, or to reinforce the things that are past so that we can reinforce the future in a different way. If you are comfortable with the things that we have accomplished, then that is the House Negro syndrome. Look into yourself, dig deep into yourselves, push further. And that's something ingrained again in us since those 12 million people were displaced millennia ago. Then we have the field slave, who is the absolute opposite, who is the revolutionary, who is the strong, let's get out of here, let's move forward. And that you have the field slave who says anything is better than what I have now. And that is where we are now, if you ask me. We are having that field slave mentality where anything is better than where we are now. That's how we ended up in the political field that we're in now. Politics has never been as interesting as it has been this past few years. And that is because we have all switched over. Most of us have switched over to that field slave mentality. We do not like master at all. We are not satisfied with the rags that we're given. We're not satisfied with eating pig guts and chitlins, as we call it now, because that's all we had back then, and over seasoning it so it lasts longer. We are not satisfied with the white man's mindset. And that is the field slave mentality that is fire to me, that is encouraging, that we need, that we should again be putting our ear to the ground and listening to. Those are the things I liked about Malcolm X that differentiated him from other activists in my mind, and that's why he stood out to me, encouraging that mentality, and to make sure that we are being aware of the 20th century slave master. And I'm going to break that down to you as well, and making sure that in this Black experience and growing up Black and living as a Black person or a person of color or as a gay person where you're also ostracized, or where you're also looked upon with a different standard. Beware of the modern slave master. Beware of the modern 20th century Uncle Toms. And if you don't know the Uncle Tom story, I'm going to tell you, like I told you last week, Google it. Because there's no excuse for that. The Uncle Tom terminology, should Google it. Or my good friends here at the Progress Report may give you a little tidbit, a little knowledge on the term Uncle Tom. But beware of the 20th century Uncle Tom. We have a lot of people who are in power, who have the ability to create this change. A lot of POCs and a lot of allies who publicly will portray that they are about this movement, or they are about Black people and they understand and things of that nature. And don't get me wrong, there are a few people that I genuinely believe understand and genuinely want to make a change, just like our President Biden is doing and is so adamant about, which I love. But there are still those Uncle Toms that are, that have that House Negro mentality of making sure that they're keeping the population tame and making sure that it appears to be some things in motion so that there are no uprisings. And we have to be aware of those people because they hide well. And that goes way back again to the House Negro syndrome. And your job as a POC in power is to highlight those values and those points for the people who put you there. And we lose track of that a lot, especially with politicians. And it's a mentality of making sure that the masses suffer peacefully, and that's all it is to make sure that we suffer peacefully, without gripe. Um, Bringing it back to that day again, bringing it back to that era again, where the House Negro was duty was to make sure that we stayed tame, and that people were not running away, and that the work was getting done because they were better than the field slave, which was not so. But to suffer peacefully, the laws that have been put in place that are, directly affecting Black and Brown people and queer people, again, that's a way of suffering peacefully, to keep us in the position we're in, but also, you know, unaware, and blissfully unaware at that. Uh, I see. We have a few more comments. It was Jonathan saying it was the whites' property at all times. Black people really never had rights. Even those days, it's hard for us. Blacks, Hispanics, and Latinos. Absolutely, and that's another reason why the wealth gap is the way it is. And I'm gonna have to say Google that one too, because we don't have enough time to get into the wealth gap. That may be a whole another episode or series for you guys. But that's another reason that the wealth gap has been the way it is for so long, and has been so hard to close between the POC community and the white community, because they have acquired that wealth through property and through owning things, and most of those things that they owned were just claimed, and not that they were acquired in the right way. And if you read your history books, even the history books they teach in school, the ones that aren't 100% accurate, even in those, you'll see a lot of white history or a lot of non-POC history that is taught. You'll see the claim property, and those properties go down into family lineage. Those properties produce income. Those properties produce different wealth for different people. But we weren't allowed to join in on that wealth. And like I said earlier, as soon as we decided, or as soon as we were capable of doing such, they made sure that they did everything in their power to still continually keep that separate. And underneath it all, we still have that. Like you said, if you take a viewpoint of the communities and the neighborhoods and the undesired areas, that's still a thing, unfortunately. Um, and then we have Jaden saying gentrification and the city funding goes to higher income neighborhoods, leaving BIPOC people, leaving BIPOC neighborhoods run down for decades. Absolutely, because the funding is not allocated for it, because there are those people who don't speak up for the funding, and they downright just don't think that they can allocate funds for, and when I say they, I mean people in charge, for BIPOC communities, because it won't yield a return in their eyes. Whereas we're seeing where people who live in those neighborhoods, or people who are around those neighborhoods, are speaking more of a, like, let's have the same living conditions as we would on the east side, or even to the point where and that brings me to this, like, Black Hollywood again. And one of my favorite shows, not growing up, but as an adult, going back and watching The Jeffersons, even to the point where they, like, and one of my favorite books and plays, and I think it even made it into a movie, Raisin in the Sun, highlights how those communities live, and how those places are so overcrowded, and even still have people living on the top of their budget, because limited working for people who live in those neighborhoods, or limited jobs that are offered to the people in those struggling conditions. But even in The Jeffersons, they say moving on up to the east side, and they got to the east side from what I remember, and they even still had to live in the Black version of the east side, which is terrible when you think about it, but it still happens. We still have the same thing happening, and that was 70s, 80s, like 60s thing, that when the fight started. Which is, again, going to speak to those people in power who aren't allocating, who aren't speaking up. Even the POCs, we're holding them accountable, because those are the POCs that I'm speaking to when I say Uncle Tom syndrome or House Negro syndrome. It makes no sense that someone in power that could help those people, or help that group, of people to be better or to even be on the same playing field wouldn't. So that blows my mind. And that brings me right back to the Uncle Tom. Um, yeah. Even now, Jaded says, there was a black woman who did an experiment trying to sell her house. They offered her white husband 40% more after they removed all the photos of the wife and children from the home. Oh, that's insane, Jaden. That's insane. It's really ridiculous. Again, we're getting into this Negro experience, and it is apparent that it is not equal playing ground. And that is where I'm coming from today. And I really, really hope to light a fire under someone with this because it is something that is underspoken about, even still when we are highlighting Black issues and problems around the world. And with that being said, I'm going to leave that with you. But, again, we're remembering Black history for the voices that spoke up for us, not just the quiet and the cool, calm, and collected. We're speaking up for all of the Black voices around in history. We're speaking about, and I'm going to get into a few current ones next week of Black legends and icons, because there are a few that are worth noting that I think are worth noting, a few trans icons that are worth noting. I will. Don't you worry. We're getting there. But I want to just mention a few of these names that I came upon of these people in history that are Black but also gay. That stood out to me today. There's Pat Parker, who was a poet, and we have no lack of literature giants in Black history, but I think that they are one of the most important. It is most important to be able to verbalize and communicate our standpoints as a community, as a people, and having people who are well written and well versed is a really good tool for disarming those people who may be adverse to, the movement, or those people who may be adverse to the way you think and the way you feel. Being well versed and being able to communicate those things, we thank poets and we thank writers from the history who have been able to do that for us. Because it's not always about being in your face or like, or about writing or whatever you want to call it. Sometimes you can write or a letter or a poem or something that gets your point across much easier and much quicker than a speech. Because as we know, speeches don't always travel well, especially back in the day, where like just like when the slaves were freed, and that took like 20 years to happen. Then we have people in the music industry, which I think is even more important to see, because we, as a community, as people of color, have dominated the entertainment and music industry. There were people like Alberta Hunter, Ma Rainey, Billie Holiday, and Bessie Smith. These are Black and gay activists of their time. Another writer, we had Anita Cornwell. And then we got into the politicians and the activists, and George Washington Carver, a scientist who was also Black and gay. We had George Bellinger Jr., who was an AIDS activist, and that's another really big pandemic issue, economic problem that we are having right now, that we've been having for the past 20, 30, 40 years, that needs to be looked into and dealt with a little bit more as well. And he was one of the few that started that fight for us. We have Ken Barber on the comments also saying the money goes to wealthy neighborhood schools, keeping poorer families, especially BIPOC, with less access to education. Absolutely. Uninformed is the best way that that's what the best fight that they had against us at a point in time. Keeping that group of people separate from the right education, or keeping the poorer families poor. It is expensive to be poor, let me tell you. And it takes a lot of work to create that cycle of poor, of that cycle of it takes even more work than to build wealth to continue that poor cycle. I read something or listened to a TED talk about how it is expensive to be poor. Because again, like Ken's saying, they keep the wealthy neighborhoods wealthy, they keep the poor poor, and they keep the money in the wealthy area. And even where it comes down to the point where in a not so desirable area or in a predominantly Black area, you won't find one of the nicer grocery stores. You won't find a bank. What you'll find is a low budget grocery store, something very cheap, something maybe not as healthy. And you won't find a bank. You'll probably find a check cashing place. And these are the things that they do to create these communities. These are the things that they do to highlight the upper echelons and to make certain areas feel different than others. And it should not be so. Uh, why we can't have a bank in a poor area is the difference between why that area is poor. And it's sad. It's sad that the correlation isn't there. Um, yeah, yeah. 40 years and still no cure. Jaden says about the AIDS pandemic. Only PrEP for prevention or undetected. And again, that's a struggle that's been going on for 40 years. Which is another reason, again, like I spoke about the distrust in the community amongst the Black people, amongst BIPOC. Um, that distrust started before the AIDS pandemic, but was highlighted during because there the people who didn't have to deal with the AIDS pandemic didn't, and most of the people that were in power when that began were cis white men, and it didn't affect their world, it didn't affect their bubble, so they didn't attend to it, and now here we are 40 years later, still drawing attention to it, still saying this is what we need, this is what we want. So keep at it. Keep at it. And again, I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge these people: George Bellinger Jr. again, George Washington Carver, Barbara Jordan again. I'm not sure if I got a chance to mention Barbara Jordan, but she was also a politician, a Black female gay politician. So she hit the lotto, and as you can only imagine, that was extremely difficult for someone like her to do, especially in her time period. Um, and I want to have you guys come and tell me your coming out stories. And make sure you look for that post. I'll probably do a few more with our next few chapters. I'm going to do 4 chapters of the Negro experience. We're going to dig deep into coming out stories and some of the major people that are worth noting about their coming out stories and history, and even current ones that again that are activists or moving forward with with this agenda that we are all on. So look forward for that. And I wanted to quickly share with you, my coming out story. Um, yeah, very true, Jaden. Very true. Waiting for death basically was the solution that many people had to deal with when it came to the AIDS pandemic because it was underfunded or it wasn't looked at as a problem by the higher ups or by the white cis male who was in charge of it. And not until we began to have representation in those fields did it start becoming a problem or start becoming something that we needed to deal with. But yeah, I want to tell you quickly, I'm a little bit over my time today, quickly about my coming out story. And I will gladly say that I identify myself as a bisexual male. I am, I still enjoy female company, but has it been a while? Yeah. Yeah. But anywho, that is not the point here. I came out when I was 16, which I'm so grateful that I was able to do, because I hear a lot of stories about people who weren't able to come out or who couldn't find the courage or, just wasn't the right time or whatever, what may have you. I was grateful to come out around that age. I had just started dating. Psychic had just came out. Um, I remember gladly walking up to someone, flipping up my Psychic and asking them for their AIM and their screen name. Um, but I had just started dating. It was very scary because I had known that I had feelings for females, but then I was discouraged to explore the feelings about men that I noticed early on had feelings for men, the same feelings that I had for women. And it was really hard for me, especially growing up in a Black family. And you guys know, growing up in a Black family, if you are a POC, a strict Black Christian family. It was very, very hard for me to come to terms with that. I tried to pray it away. I tried to work it away. I tried to not acknowledge it. I tried to sex it away. I thought if I had sex with enough females that maybe it would just disappear. But I was very, very sad about it, and even to the point where I might use the word depressed, if I think about it. And I grew up in a single family home, and I really, really didn't want to disappoint my mom, being the oldest child. So I felt that I was being gay, and it was really hard. And there was a lot of pressure on me to be um, the golden child, or to have my life together, and to be the perfect child. So it took me until about 16, 17, and I mentioned it to my mom, and she was upset with me, but she told me it was a phase. So I believed it was a phase. Then I came out again the following year because I had started seeing men, and I wanted someone to know because I didn't want them to see me out in the streets and be doing all the talking or what have you. And I played a lot of sports too. So then at that point, when I came out the second time, I was told that it was not true because I was dating a female and because I played sports. And as I tell you this, it sounds bizarre and awful and hilarious all at the same time, but it's true. And then finally, the third time I had to come out, I had told my mom, I told my dad, who was the most upset about it, and I basically was in a relationship at that point with a male. And that was my way of saying, hey, this is happening. It's in your face. Deal with it. How are you going to deal with it? And I'm really grateful that I was able to do that at such a young age, considered a young age for me. Um, but now we have people who are able to come out at like 15, 14, whenever you feel the courage or whenever you have the words to express what you're feeling. And I am so adamant about that. And I'm really grateful that we live in a world where people are able to do that and not fear like 17-year-old, like the 17-year-old I told you about earlier, and not fear being judged or fear harm even. Not so much as we did before. And that's a great environment that we foster. That's a great place. Um, and after the third time of coming out, I had felt very solidified in myself and very comfortable with being who I was. And that has only grown now. And again, I'm grateful that I've had that time to grow into who I am and continue to grow even from this point. But being who I was the most important thing on my list of things. Other than being black and growing up and being uh, something and being a functional member of society, I knew being gay was going to be a part of who I am. And I'm, again, so glad that now we live in a place where people can just be who they are, as it should be. So again, I'm going to leave that there with you guys. My story may not be as exciting as some of yours. It did take a lot for me to come out, but yeah, that was it for me. And after that, I had some tiffs with the family back and forth, like we almost all do. We didn't speak for a while, and to this point, I still don't have the best relationship with my dad because that was not his plan. But you have to live your life for yourself. That's all I can say. Um, and I hope that my story reaches someone. Again, I thank you guys for watching today. Keep up with it. We got two more parts to this series. I know you're going to enjoy it. So continue to join me here. Continue to join us in the Progress Report Gang and the Progress Channel. And you're in for some good stuff. Remember to always continue being good to yourself. And I'm going to leave you here today. Thank you so much. I'll see you on Monday. Later.